Welcome. I want to say welcome to everyone joining later and also everyone that's joined on the call. This is something a bit new for us that we're trying, which is trying to share some of the incredible conversations that we have around gender-based violence, because we keep having them with amazing people when we're doing our day-to-day work and being like, we really wish we could share them. And we figure we'll just do some of them live, put people like Evan on the spot and have these conversations in public so that organizations can mine some of this knowledge and also just reach out to us if there are things that pique their interest. As always in this space, safety is paramount. If you're reviewing this later, you can still reach out to us and get some support if anything we talk about today means that you need support in any way. It's something that I'm always really conscious of, that when we talk about gender-based violence, harassment, consent, all these sorts of things, that it reaches more than half of our population at any point in time. And that's something that we as a team are trained to do in particular. But also, if you do want support for anything of the things we talked today, we are here for that. And that goes on as well. Today, however, we are focusing on prevention and education, particularly when it comes to youth and young people, which is a big passionate spot of mine. I was a very young person when I first engaged with tertiary education. I think my first days at university, I was about 15, turning 16, which is a really strange place to be in. But before we dive into that, I want to do two things. The first thing is to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. For me, that is the Yagara people, but we're joining from all around the place and pay respects to elders past and present. And because of what we're here to discuss, I also want to acknowledge the disproportionate experiences of gender-based violence and the consequences of colonialization, dispossession, systemic injustice, that it is not their cultures and it is not the cultures that we share that are the cause of that, but it is the things that have been put in place that lead to it. And I want to acknowledge their contributions as well to our understandings of how these play out, and to acknowledge that we solve this together and that we have a long way to go. I also want to acknowledge that this code is very new for many people, and we're at very different places of understanding what's happening. In particular, when we're talking about it today, there's still, let's say, 6 months to go for a lot of it. And it does boil down to many things, but at the end, it is a much higher standard for prevention and response of gender-based violence in our tertiary sectors. And in particular for non-university providers, it's things like a prevention and response plan, safe reporting pathways, and it speaks to things that we've seen affect broader businesses. That 41% of businesses last year in the ABS said they weren't aware of their obligations to provide family, domestic, and sexual violence leave or respect at work obligations. And when only 1 in 5 people who experience any of these sorts of things feel safe to access support in workplaces at the moment, according to ANROS, then we have a very long way to go, especially when it comes to 1 in 3 young people admitting to experiencing or using violence in a relationship. And so we could go into a deep meta-analysis of all of this, but as it currently stands, we have pointed Capyble's tech and analysis bot at how people are going, because all of your policies and procedures are public. And it's been a really interesting ride to see that one organization, I should say, has already met the standards. 77 so far fail the codes test, which is not surprising given how far out we are. And 10, we were unable to find any evidence at all of gender-based violence in the meta-analysis that we did. But all of it, I think, when we moved into section 3 of the code, which is around prevention and education, that's where evidence is really tricky and where action becomes the point. And that's where I want to stop talking about the planning and the policy and the procedure work and get into a discussion of the doing. And that is why I want to introduce Evan and Consent Labs today. But I don't want to steal your thunder. Evan, could you please tell us, who are you? Who are Consent Labs? What do you do? Yes, I'm very excited to talk to you about the work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cam. It's really great to be here today and be a part of this conversation on a topic that it's clear there's so much passion for and interest for. My name's Evan Couper. I'm the acting head of curriculum at Consent Labs. So Consent Labs, what are we? We are a national not-for-profit organisation who empowers young people to really recognise, prevent and take action against sexual violence. So the way that we do that is we deliver evidence-based consent and respectful education programs nationally in both secondary school and higher education institutions, where we empower young people, parents, carers, and teachers to actively change that culture around sexual violence. So that's kind of what we're seeing, and it means that when we are working in those tertiary environments or those higher education environments, our programs are specifically designed to help people learn how to tackle and take on gender-based violence on their campuses. And part of that, as we've heard, is actually supporting compliance with the National Education Code. So we're really excited to be here today.
And there's an obligation to provide education to everyone, staff, students, regarding the code. We've had education obligations before, and a lot of them tend to fall into this kind of, I don't want to say tick and flick, because I have a lot more respect for people in this sector than some of the other sectors where they tend to churn out a lot of, they've got so many obligations, they have to make sure they get all of the training done. But we can fall into that trap. And the thing that I always get kind of a bit fanboy about when it comes to consent labs is the depth of co-design and the hours of work that you've spent. And I want you to put me in the perspective of young people in these experiences when you're looking at that co-design. What's going on? What are they saying they need? What are people actually asking for when it comes to education in this space?
Yeah, you're so right. I think when we see and hear about e-learning, so often it can feel like something that's going to fall really flat if it doesn't directly address the lived experiences and like relevant scenarios that young people are themselves navigating. So to us, that's why it's been really important that we've taken our 10 years of working with young people on the ground and actually channeled that into the creation of training that directly reflects those experiences that we're hearing about. So we build our programs with young people at the very forefront of our minds, but we also actually build them alongside them. So this is both through active engagement with young people that we work with and through the fact that so much of our team who then delivers these programs themselves are young people. So we have that ability to co-develop with expert advisors who really have strong specialist content knowledge that ensures we have that evidence base. But we're also equally valuing the significance of lived experience and young people's insights into what's actually important to them. So when we go back and we get to have those conversations with young people, we're hearing lots of nuance, right, in the scenarios that they're having to navigate. And sometimes it can feel like there's this disconnect between maybe the education that's been provided to them versus the reality of what's actually going on in their lives. And being able to design programs that have young people's voices in it means that we can more accurately understand situations where there's digital elements to it, there's unique interpersonal elements to it that haven't actually been experienced by previous generations. And not being afraid to get into the nitty-gritty of those scenarios. I think that's a real strength that we as an organization have, is that we have the insight and we have the confidence to go, we know this is what your reality looks like, and we know that we can't shy away from talking about this. And so in being able to lean into those conversations, you're building rapport and you're also building credibility with young people, because they themselves can then see, oh, this isn't something that is really distant from me. This is something that's happening directly in my life. And I can see how I could apply the skills and the lessons from this to my everyday environments.
Yeah, talk to me about a bit of the specifics of that, because I had a very humbling older young person experience the other day of being like, do you still use Snapchat? Like, what is it, disappearing messages or deep fakes, or like what are the things that are actually coming up for young people, and like what do they want to know? What are the things that should be in this education space?
Totally. Yeah. Well, one of the things I think that you mentioned is of the new kind of digital dimension of the ways in which interpersonal relationships are being navigated now. And we recognize that things like what we're hearing from young people are things like consent and communication and boundary negotiations are really different. The way that can look really different online and through like a digital device than it might in person. So when we're talking about how to have conversations about consent or respectful relationships, we actually have to take that into account and go, okay, here are some key things that are missing. We're missing things like body language. We're missing things like tone of voice. And young people want us to really explore then, okay, well, how can I make sure that I'm engaging with this content respectfully, that I know that this person is comfortable with what I'm sharing? How can I ask in a way that doesn't sound like a bot is communicating? How can we make sure we're still keeping this human element to our online interactions? But young people, they're also just looking for clarity. There's a lot of, I think, there's a lot of, I think, shroudedness around some of these maybe darker topics or sensitive topics that a lot of adults don't feel really comfortable speaking directly to a young person about. So we're able to go in and say, hey, here are the laws around sexting. Here are the laws around how to keep yourself safe online when we're talking about things like intimate images. We directly talk about being able to be critical in our analysis of certain kinds of media, including pornography. So there's whole topics that I think so many people and teachers feel really unprepared to be able to speak to, which I honestly want to say is so justified, right? Like, so many educators are so often put in these positions of being asked questions or being expected to speak to certain topics that they don't have necessarily that expertise or even comfort with that subject matter. So it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of burden to place on an already very overworked staff member who has other kinds of priorities going on. So I think we are able to actually hear what young people are wanting and then actually connect them to that kind of specialist insight, which is what we're trying to do through the trainings that we're talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine I've ever thought of the education space that is as one of that's heavily over-resourced. You know, that people are coming and going, oh, what shall I pull from the menu of all of the things that I could deliver? And I think everyone we've worked with so far in the space and talked to is kind of like, we have a lean team, or maybe I am the team. What do I do? How do I, that they're experts in their context. And it's something I think when we were chatting about this prior to today, you talked about the kind of like the difference between people understanding their specific context, but not necessarily the content that needs to go in today, and trying to find the mode and the right kind of like what fits what, and what is this intentionally quite vague code, because it's up for interpretation for different spaces so that it can fit different spaces in the first rollout. How do they find that? So I was looking up, and you've got e-learning, in-person programs, blended learning programs. You kind of have my wish list of like things that I wish people would engage us to design for them in different spaces, because often it's kind of that like what mode fits what. But are you finding certain modes work better for certain areas of the education you've deployed so far?
That's a really good question. Yeah, we definitely intentionally took that approach to how we go about packaging these offerings and how we go about ensuring that we can have it really bespoke and give people the options to go, well, my student body is actually going to respond best to maybe like a blended learning package where we have e-learning that is accessible to a really broad range of students, and then we also have that accompanied by in-person sessions. So we wanted to be able to give that option of breadth and depth depending on that institution's needs and their knowledge of young people. But we also know, based off when we're looking at like the specific topics that we are addressing in our kind of support of the training program, like we sit in that knowledge and capability building part of the code standard 3, and so we want to make sure that the training that we created was really able to cover a real breadth of topics. So within that, there are things around being able to things like understand consent and gender-based violence, being able to understand drivers and impacts, and those are the topics that we know actually does resonate really well in an e-learning module, because we can explore things like scenario-based learning. So through scenarios that we are able to go further in depth to via an e-learning module, we're making sure that those youth-centered examples are able to be explored in depth in a way that gives that learner the opportunity to pace it in their own time, return to it in their own time in an environment that's actually safe and comfortable for them. We know that having these kinds of conversations can be really challenging for a lot of people, especially if this is a brand new topic, or if we're introducing language that maybe isn't familiar to this particular person before, which is like honestly so many of us, right? I'm imagining the majority of people will have that learning process of actually what is the right words that I can use around this? What is the language that I can say? And so we wanted to, with that option of being able to have a self-paced module, works really well when you're engaging people with more sensitive or new kinds of content. But as you say, we also know that there's definitely other kinds of topics that we need to have that in-person delivery mode around. So one of our modules that we've developed to support the suite of offerings we've created as part of this National Code kind of training program is our compassionate responses to disclosure module. And this is in response to the overwhelming amount of feedback that we've heard from our work on the ground around people wanting to understand how can I respond to a disclosure that I receive from a young person, what are the words that I should say. And this is also something that's reflected in the code as being required for all staff and student leaders too. So we want to make sure that that was something we could deliver in person, so that there was that real human impact and that learning could happen in a really safe classroom environment. So when we're thinking about things like trauma-informed pedagogies, when we're thinking about how we actually bring learners along that experience with us, having those two approaches together is a really strong kind of multimodal offering. And our other tertiary programs that are also delivered face-to-face have that similar kind of that strengths-based approach where we can come in, we can attune to the level of comfort in the room, we can adjust to the level of experience or knowledge in the room. That means that what we are then talking about has the greatest impact. We're not simply coming in with pre-prepared scripts, pre-prepared outcomes. Our facilitators are highly trained and are able to actually adapt and work with whatever is happening in that room, because that's the experiential learning process of how knowledge is created and lands in a really significant way, rather than it being another kind of course that has to be sat through but without any meaningful impact.
Yeah, I think the penny dropped for me. I had the wonderful opportunity to travel around and audit programs around the world a few years ago, which kicked off Capyble and this whole journey in this space for us. But it came back to this idea of like there's a lot of barriers in the space that are around awareness and understanding, which e-learning can be really good at. It can be sit with the topics, understand something, play around with scenarios, kind of grasp a concept. But the idea of practice and differentiating awareness and practice and how long it takes to find your own words for something, which can get harder as we get older, because the more we get entrenched in our, I'm trying to think of the non-buzzword, but strategic rigidity is one of them, or cognitive rigidity is the other, of we get used to doing something over and over again, and humans are great at doing the same thing over and over again. We get faster and faster at it, and we form the same pathways for it. Breaking that is really tricky, and I'm really intrigued in your experience with these. Does that that disclosure conversation, or diving into the things like that, which can be very much practice-based and in-person and finding your right words, does that change much with the different age groups? I mean, even among young people, between young people and I guess like older young people, are there things that you've found in that messy experience bit?
Yeah, I love that idea of we're actually asking people to like break their scripts, like break their practice codes. And like, I just think that's a really great visual of how hard it can be to switch gears from like one way of communicating about something to trying a new way. And I think we have that sense of, well, if you've been doing something one way for decades, that's going to be a harder muscle to change up. That's going to be a harder thing to break than if this is maybe your first time getting to try something. So there definitely are differences when it comes to how kind of accessible or how open or how brave people might feel about trying certain things. But we also know that for the majority of us, very few of us received any kind of actual comprehensive education about this whatsoever at any age, right? So in terms of the level that people are starting at, sometimes it's actually not all that different. Like depending on your area of expertise, if we are speaking with people who, have extensive experience in this field, then obviously they've got that expertise. But if we're talking to adults or teachers who might have not had to be in this position many times before, often we're all coming at it from the same starting point. And so I think there's a real opportunity there for us to actually learn from each other. Like I know so many times, just in my personal experience, I've been doing this work with young people in the classroom for a decade, which means that I am now officially aged out of being considered a youth, which is shocking. And So even though that's been like the lived experience of being that peer-to-peer educator, I'm now at a point where I'm speaking to 16, 17-year-olds and going, wow, you have so much more understanding of this than I did at your age. And so there is that ability to recognize the experience of people in such a variety of settings, right? And I think too, though, like when we are, for example, when we're encouraging people to practice responding to disclosures, we know that for students, they're in these really, like university or higher education is this really transformative period of self-development and interpersonal discovery. And so those peer relationships become so significant as people are discovering who they are, what makes them tick. And so therefore being able to, in those moments, have the language to support a friend who might have disclosed an instance of violence to you is so crucial that we can equip students with those skills. We know research tells us that a peer will likely be the first person that somebody discloses to because of that relationship, especially among young people. So that's one of the reasons we take that whole of campus, whole of community approach, because whether it's a peer, whether it's a student leader, whether it's a staff, people in that environment need to be prepared. They need to be able to recognize, okay, what's maybe my role in this person's experience? It's not going to be to know everything. I think that's one of the things that this code and these trainings can maybe feel a little intimidating, because there's a lot, obviously, that's going on in here, but the ask isn't that people become experts. People aren't expected to become overnight pros at knowing how to support somebody who is going through an experience of gender-based violence. The ask here is that people build the tiny muscles, the tiny skills that build over time into muscles around how do we actually be alongside somebody in that journey? How can I be someone who this person feels really safe with, so that in the future I can make sure that they are supported to access the care that they need? So that's why I think, there's differences for sure, but those differences really feed into each other and create so much more of a richer whole of campus texture for how we actually build safe communities together.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things in this space, particularly if you're in the advocacy side of it, or you get very drawn into it, as you get kind of drawn along this thing of thinking everyone needs to be capable of handling everything, and that suddenly the educator who's an expert in their field, who's working with people to share that expertise and guide them through it, now also needs to be an expert in relationships, in consent, in gender-based violence, in the manosphere, in like all of these things to do their job, can feel like, oh no, I have to have another degree to do.
How exhausting, right?
And like, how do you, I guess, taking that point of like, maybe it's part of the practice of how do we weave this into what makes me better at my role, and what makes me able to make, if young people feel safe, if there are older people in my class, they also feel safe interacting with the young people and being a part of this community, and that we can share knowledge together then, and they feel that I might not be able to do everything if something is wrong for them, but that I can help guide them to the people who are here to do that. I think it comes back to like I feel like this is a really beautiful application of like of the old, like, you don't have to be a counselor, but you do need to be able to help guide someone and hold space when that moment happens, if you're in a position of power or responsibility.
Yes. And so many of those, like, as you've just like kind of pointed to, are those micro soft interpersonal skills about how can I be present with this person and ensure that they have my full attention? How can I practice active listening? How can I provide validation? And we know that there are really clear and explicit mandatory reporting obligations and requirements that are still very important to be aware of, and each institution will have its own code of conduct. But when we're thinking about how can we be alongside someone in those first 90 seconds, perhaps, of that disclosure, what does that actually person need to be met with, so that we are moving at the speed of safety, and we are moving in a way that ensures that person has autonomy throughout that process, that they are the expert in what they need, which can sometimes be the knee-jerk reaction, right? When we have disclosures or experiences that we hear about, is to immediately put on our hero cap or know exactly how to fix that situation right away. And part of this is also building communities of safety where, yes, that those procedures are followed and there's real strength and there's real frameworks to support that. But the people themselves who are being navigated through those systems are cared for and have the agency and have the autonomy to be involved in what happens with their experience. So I think those soft skills are the things that we really want to be honing in on as well.
And I think that's, I want to leave time in a couple of minutes for us to answer any questions that people might have, and to open this up with the nice small group that we have for a bit of a roundtable. If there are things that anyone want to ask the two of us, and I think I'd highlight that's why I love chatting to you and also profiling some of the work that you do in the space, because we focus a lot on the systems and getting the policy, the procedures, the paperwork, the systems out of the way so that they are there to support people, but they're also not in the way of someone getting support and having a great time at their institution or with the provider. But that comes with knowledge, and that comes with the right education for the right people along that chain, which is something that you specialize in really, really well. And that co-design with youth in particular for what they need is really important. So I'll touch on a little bit of the tech stuff, and then we'll move into that kind of the questioning space as well, if anyone's got things they want to add in. But there was one thing that I wanted to get to before we finish, which was that we saw some of the eSafety Commissioner's recommendations and research come out recently and get a whole lot of profile, I think, off the back of the Manosphere pieces. And largely it was this kind of one thing that popped out to me in this space was that young people, according to that research, were more likely to condone some aspects of tech-facilitated abuse, things like location tracking, sharing phone passwords, more likely to accept people using technology in ways that older generations viewed as potentially controlling. They viewed as kind of part of life. And it depends on your interpretation of people's views on technology as they age for how you interpret that research. I think it's very important research. I love diving into it, and that's something to be wary of. But you had a beautiful thing that I'd love to touch on about that, which is what's the reaction in the context of the consultation, the work you've done to those sorts of findings, and what especially in this space, what comes up for you when we talk about technology and young people and how that intersects with this right now?
Yeah, it's a good thing to raise. I think that there's a lot of fear around what young people are using their devices for, or the kinds of ways that they're engaging in certain behaviors, because it's unfamiliar to a lot of people, or it might be through a means that has previously been used in one way but is now being used in a different kind of way. And I think that we actually don't get to be in charge of the way that media and digital technologies evolve in the way that young people use them and access them and use them to facilitate relationships. That's not something that can be controlled. That is something that is an organic development that is so often led by young people being really innovative about the way that they connect to each other. So when we hear things around those behaviors changing, or attitudes around those behaviors changing as well, to what that is showing us is that norms might have evolved, habits might have changed, but what we want to do is make sure that young people feel really equipped with the knowledge of how to keep themselves safe, regardless of what technology or platform they might be using. So as those attitudes and norms shift, can we ensure that what we're able to do as experts or as educators or as just support people in these young people's lives is keep that channel of communication open, so that if there is behavior that we don't understand or that we feel unsure about, we're actually able to check in with that person and go, hey, what's happening? How can I be of support to you? Is there something that I can do to make this, a safer environment for you? So I think there's sometimes when I see research around that, I do wonder about maybe some of the interpretation around it and the way that that reflects a lot of our fears and anxieties around changes that we're not necessarily always be able to keep up to date with. And that's okay. That's the experience of pretty much anyone who's grown up across the digital age, right? Is that it progresses at such a rate that is really impossible to keep track of. So what we can do is actually show young people that they are trustworthy, they are able to make informed choices if we are the people that they can speak to about that, if they have all the tools that they need to know when is this okay, when is this not okay, if I get a gut feeling about something and I'm not feeling super great about it, do I have a safe adult that I can speak to, or do I have peers that I can speak to so that this becomes not something that I'm experiencing in isolation? So that connection, whether it be with other members of their community, whether it be with extended school community, those connections are the things that keep people safe when it comes to shifting and evolving digital landscapes.
Yeah, I think of it as the understanding of the context is so powerful in that for people to have informed consent about what they share. Like I used to get off the bus and I had to go into a general store of someone who didn't know me as a 9-year-old, call home and go, hey, I'm 10K from home, come pick me up at 6 o'clock at night because that's the last bus that comes near my house. And now my mum still lives there. She'll share her location with me as she bike rides so that we know how long we got to order a coffee. And that's very different to like my friends will do the same when they're like, I'm an hour away. I might stop, I might not. Just view my location, you'll know where I am. Is very different from, hey, show me your location and the informed consent of being able to share that. And I find it really it reminds me a lot of the conversations about like young people don't have an attention span anymore. And then you contextualize that with like 4,500 adverts per day, as well as the AI slop spam that they get with. And maybe their filter is a lot higher. And maybe that's the hard thing of engaging them, is that if they don't see a beautiful, like, intention and well-designed and human interaction, they go, okay, I'll throw it on the pile. Like that, it feels similar to me. Maybe I'm convoluting engagement with young people's experiences being aged out as well now. But
I think that point you make around like the difference between, hey, I need your location, share it with me now, in a coercive control setting, versus that this is part of our dynamic, this is part of our normal relationship, it's okay for you to have my location. Though that context is missing from so much of the research that gets done in this space, isn't it? And so those kinds of broader patterns that you're describing around like relationship norms and friendship behaviors, that is also the context to these different behaviors and attitudes that we don't often get to see so much. So that's the part that I think we have the most amount of influence over, is being a part of, hey, when we are using different kinds of technologies, am I able to communicate with my friend offline about that? If something is expected of me, am I able to have an offline conversation? Hey, that's actually not something I'm comfortable doing. I don't want to share my location. And can we make sure that people feel confident to be able to express that if that's the case?
Yeah, and I think with 10 minutes left here, I'll do a cheeky throw to what we do and open up for questions, and we can continue babbling for 10 minutes if there aren't burning ones from people. But I think for me, I'd love to know, like for us, if you want to know if your systems are aligned and things, that's what we do. We do the analysis of and we're very happy to do a free standard analysis to see where people are at, to help guide them to what actions might help. We do that side of things. But I'd love to know, like, what are the key things that you would recommend to look at if people are looking at engaging people like yourselves in this space and looking at that part 3, that section 3 of the code. Where do they start? Where we've got 6 months to go, people need to put these pieces in place. What would you recommend?
I would definitely recommend reaching out. This is something that we really prioritize, is making sure that we're able to partner with institutions in a way that is actually going to be right for them. So we know that there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to people finding methods or partners that are able to support them in their school. So we really want to make sure that we can tailor content. We can make sure that this is the thing that makes it stick. So every single cohort is going to be different. And by partnering, we can make sure we're adapting our content to your particular local needs, your particular context scenarios that you understand the best as the people who are experts in your school community. So we want to make sure we're able to actually integrate the programs that we have with your existing frameworks and support support you to learn more about what actually your obligations might be. And part of this is going to be that ongoing evaluation of, hey, what's actually resonating with my student body? Is this something that I'm getting feedback around? Is this something, a gap that I'm seeing? That ongoing kind of monitoring and evaluation is a part of this approach as well too, so that we can make this something that's actually deeply embedded. And those are the things I would say is multidisciplinary approaches are really strong when it comes to how we can make sure this is something that is most accessible to your students. And that M&E element helps us ensure that what we're actually doing is landing with your particular students. But I wanted to also just say that this is a big code. There's a lot in there, and keep in mind, like, everybody is working this out together. So use this as a way of pushing and advocating for internal change with leadership, as that is such an essential piece to getting that buy-in. This is something that does require that real top-down commitment. And it can be used as a way of carrying on the momentum for staff who are already really passionate about this.
Yeah, and I think I would second that, and also evidence like that there are so many collaborative people working on this together right now across institutions and providers. I can even see, to shout out Katsu on the call, who has done a bunch of leading work with their team in and just to help other people get across this, because we're all figuring it out. Even the regulator is figuring it out, because we're trying to do something new and more impactful in the space. And so yeah, if you have questions, I can see one from Mix coming through there as well, but I'll throw up as well as the if you need, it's just consentlabs.org. You can find it with a Google, but go check them out. We love working, like lived experience work, co-design work, it's all of the buzzwords, but for the right reason and done right in this space. And I am such a, like, I have spent years trying to build training in this space with the right backing and the right support that does what you're doing. So I cannot fan enough about the work that you have put up. But I would say as well, like, there are some people that are under-resourced. And one question that I had sent through beforehand, but also one I think we've chatted about, is like, for people who don't have the resources to hire people like us to do the policy procedure, the analysis work, and the guidance on the systems, or yourselves for the training, where do they start? Like, what's the beginning?
It's a really good question, and it's something that it's like important to acknowledge, right? Is that not everybody is necessarily able to have that has the resources or funding to access the support that is desperately needed as a part of this. And so I think it's important to remember that everybody has a role to play when it comes to understanding our approach to the prevention of gender-based violence. So whether that is through acknowledging that we need to be really focusing in on active bystandership. Active bystandership is that muscle that everybody can build by practicing it every single day, being able to acknowledge, hey, this is an area that actually does really require me to be able to step up. What are the different ways that I can be a part of changing this culture? Those small movements have a lot of momentum and build up toward being able to be part of shifting broader social change. But when it comes to where to begin, I would really encourage people to have a shop around, do some research, look at what different providers are offering, get a sense of what's available for you, rely on the code as that thing that you can use as a tool to advocate for that internal change with leadership. And know that, yeah, there's not going to be a one silver bullet approach. It's going to be something that is very specific to your needs. So just getting a sense of actually what's out there is really important, and knowing that you're not going to be the only ones figuring this out. We're all kind of in this together, I think is important there.
Yeah, I think that executive responsible bit of the code is really useful for getting someone on side to help you, like, advocate for this and push for this, because it names that quite nicely, which is it's a hard thing to get around if you're struggling to find buy-in amongst the, like, 50 different priorities that you have with your executive to make sure you're getting through day to day for this. And I love that message of hope as well. Like, we're just figuring this out. We're all like, it is always the messy middle bit of what does this look like in practice. And I actually, to throw to that question from Mix that I can see in the chat, and if anyone else has any for the last, like, 4 or 5 minutes that we have, I'm curious about if you've seen positive uses of technology or in this space for gender-based violence prevention. Are you seeing anything with tech that's inspiring you in this space, or things that you're seeing the flip side of? We talked a bit about the negatives and the potentials for it, but is there any positives that you're seeing?
Yeah, great question. I mean, but one of those things about technology is that just like any tool, it has the potential for great harm and great benefit. And one of the ways that I think like we understand and can connect to young people is that so many of their most kind of intimate and treasured relationships do happen in a digital sphere. And that actually is a point of great strength because it means that, for example, young people who are maybe in minority community groups who exist in really disadvantaged areas or who themselves are seeking those kind of social contact and connections with other young people like themselves can actually find that. So it's a real protective factor to have young people able to find community spaces online when they aren't actually available to them in person. So I think when we're talking about this from an intersectionality perspective, we're bringing in young people who in many ways, like that is something we need to keep at the core of this is we have in-person relationships and we can be the experts in actually how we navigate that. But young people are innovative. Young people are curious. Young people will seek out people that they feel safe with, that they feel seen by, they feel comfortable with. And in many times this happens in an online world if that's not immediately available to them. So I think that's something we have to really keep in mind is that that's a really important part of making sure young people have the space to develop into their full selves and their full potential is sometimes does take place in those online worlds.
Yeah, I mean, the consistency bit is so powerful for me of we have another way now of being consistent in our relationships with each other. And especially when people are experiencing, when it comes to gender-based violence, they lose that consistency a lot. They lose, people change around them, they try and protect them, their relationships shift. And that's something they fear the most is that, everything changes. But there's now another way to be consistent with tech. You can send a meme to just show to share a funny thing. You can share a reel. You can there are ways to affirm relationships and show up for someone now that are so small but consistent that we didn't have a little while ago. That you can be like, I'm still your friend. Nothing is fundamentally shifted in our relationship because you're experiencing something. Here is that, that reel about that thing that we're interested in, or that meme, or this thing that made me think of you. Or for staff student relationships, is like, here's the schedule. How are you going with that? Like the ways to connect and be consistent outside of their experiences are more now, and that's that's scary for the negative sides of it, but it is so warming for the consistency sides of it. And that I don't know, I'm terrified of some of the things of the way the world is going, but I'm so excited by the connection potential for it. I think it's the with greater potential for control comes also greater potential for connection. And
yeah, absolutely. And just the last thing to add to that is also the greater potential for creativity and the way that creativity manifests in an online space where people get to actually practice innovation and practice challenges and problem solving. And like that is something that I'm so inspired by when I'm working with young people, is that they're able to flex those creative muscles in a way that I've never seen done before, or that previously would have taken a team of 5 engineers to do before, and now it is simply something that they can do in their bedrooms. And I think that is something that is so core to well-being, to young people's mental health, to young people's self-expression. And if we can find ways to really recognize and validate that, it means that the messaging that they're receiving is not just one of fear or shame or avoidance. It's actually, hey, you have this these opportunities to express, to create, to connect with people, and we want to protect those. We want to ensure that you're still able to do that safely, and that requires support and education for people around you as well.
I think that's actually a really powerful wrap-up message for us at time as well, is that you can do so much more with the right knowledge and connections and relationships now in your life than we could 2 years ago. We can point young people or any people with the right knowledge as education organizations at something, and they can smash through it with a smaller team or a smaller group. And that comes with, if we can focus the education on those tools and awareness and practicing those pieces, then I think there is a really, if we view them in that capable, I think there's something that you've said before, we view them in that capable mindset, we view them in that they are individuals who are more capable than we were 10 years ago, that they have so much more strength and so much more resistance and things to resist, but that we are arming them with that in this process, and that we can do something with it. That is the hope and inspiring bit that I take from it, is going like it's a scary, brave new world and all those sorts of platitudes, but I think that is the core of it, is like they have these amazing tools at their fingertips, but we are responsible for helping to guide them in the use of that.
I love that. What a great message to end on.
Awesome. And thank you for joining, everyone. We're trialing this out, so if you have any feedback on what you'd like to know, different topics, all the wonderful things, check out Evan and their history as well in all of this, because there's someone who has worked in this space for ages, and yeah, check out both organizations, all of the pieces. You can look us up. I'm sure we'll share lots of small clips on socials, but thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.